Greetings and welcome. My name is Jake Grayson. I'm a wildlife and food forest garden designer, and there is yet more CAD noodling. Just a quick one here. I'm doing this anyway, so I just wanted to show you. This is a primary school. It's a triangle of land, and I just wanted to. I put in where the labyrinth is going to go and where the seating area is going to go, and I just wanted to show you about creating a block and then cutting a wedge in that seating area. So let's get cracking. So use your imagination, because this is what you need to do with CAD, is use your imagination, because it's not immediately obvious. This is a plan view from the top. This is a triangle of land here, and you can see there's a labyrinth here, which is approximately 6 meters in diameter. It's fitting between the willow sculpture on one side, and then there's a small cherry tree on the other side. And this down here is the seating area. So that is a bench. Imagine like a plan view of a bench, which is about a meter and 1.2 meters wide by about 50 centimeters deep. And the idea is it's surrounded by a relatively low wall, a gabion wall, and you creating gabions because they're really good for creating habitat for wildlife, and there's lots of interesting things that you can do with them, and they look great, and they're also they're pretty cool, and they're pretty relatively cheap as well to make. And what I want to do is to make it into a horseshoe shape, so that around the back you feel like you're enclosed, even though it's not particularly high. I want to plant it up, put plants in the top of the wall, so you have like a sheet that you're encompassed by plants and by a wall, and people have to walk around to the front area to come in. So it's not open. It's like you sit there, and you, even though you're part in the garden, you feel more kind of secure in that space. So that's the idea behind it. So what I've done is create this is very rough at this stage, and you can always get into more detail later on. And so what I think is so useful about using CAD is I've marked out the dimensions for the garden, and then I'll do this. I'll just create a wedge so that it's like it's a horseshoe shape, and by doing that you can then get a piece of string and a bit of bamboo, and you can mark out the actual circle, and if that's the right space, and you can put a bench in and just try it out for size. So always do this. It's a really good guide to get an idea of roughly where these things can fit in, but always try it out on the ground and see if it fits in that space. So let's get moving. The first thing I'm going to do is to create a block. So this labyrinth here is 6 meters diameter. There's a block, and what I will do is select all the elements, shift click all the elements. So that's the wall there. So you can see that's a double wall. That's that bit there, and then this rectangle here is the bench. So create block from selection, and then you set the reference point is where it's created from. So I'm going to call this seating area. Okay, so now that can be moved as one item, which is so handy rather than having to move individual items. Double click it. I'll go double click it to go into it and to edit it, and then I'll add. I'll add I'll do it by the menu, text, and get a text block up. I've already done this before actually, but it's a seating area and it's 4 meters diameter. For some reason I always colour my text orange. I'm not terribly sure why. I think it's because it's a kind of in-betweeny sort of colour. Okay, seating area 4 meters diameter approx. So if you go down to the bottom right hand corner where I have my list of blocks set up, you go out of the block, exit the block. You can now see that it has text attached to it, which is brilliant. So that's good. So that's the first bit, creating a block. And so if I wanted to have multiple seating areas, I can copy and paste, and any change I make to the original will reflect in all those other blocks. But what is so nice is being able to pick up a block and then move it, rather than having to shift click each individual item. So it makes it a lot easier. Okay, so now what we're going to do is to create a wedge, and there's a couple of tools here which I haven't really spoken about before. This will be in my upcoming CAD course, which I'm working on, which will be I'll be recording next week. And the two things I want to do firstly is to create a wedge. So I'm not going to try and do it at the angle that I want it eventually, because it's a bit of a strange. It's 70 degrees. What I'm going to do is to create the wedge first of all, and then I'll rotate both of the circles around so it matches. I'll show you what I mean. It's going to be easy to show. So I'm just going to do it straight up. I've got a rough idea of how wide I want it. So I'll get the line tool, and then get the line tool point to point, and then I'm going to do snap tool. It's really important to use figure out how to use a snap, because I want to snap to on the entity, on an actual object itself. You can see here it's snapped onto the circle itself, and I want to kind of leave it that imagine sitting down and you're surrounded by a low circular wall, and I want to leave that horseshoe shape. I want it fairly, not massively open. I still want to have a bit here and a bit here, but enough space for a couple of people to walk through. So I'm going to do it around about like that. And again, I just hit escape to get back to my pointer tool, select it, and it's about 130 degrees. So I'll call that 130 just to be, to round it up. Actually 130 degrees. And this is under the property editor. You can fine tune it there. Maybe a bit more, 135, call it 135 degrees. So this is really nice. What's really nice in CAD is that you can create a line freehand and then tidy it up afterwards using the property editor. So that's a really kind of good way of working, is fine tuning stuff, putting stuff down and fine tuning it, just shifting it over bit by bit. So that is a line. It's 135 degrees from the center. And I want to use the mirror tool. I'm going to mirror that line. I'm going to so that's there, and I'm just going to flip it over so it goes over to the other side. So I get to the modification tools, and then this one here is the mirror tool, and I'll mirror it, dunk, there, okay, and keep the original and mirror it over. Oops, wrong way. Oh, sorry, that one. Mirror, up there, and then keep original. Yeah, it's a bit. I don't use it very often actually. It's a bit newly. So now you can see you've got two. I just mirrored it, flipped it over, and you kind of. It's always a bit. Yeah, there's always lots of different options. You have to set a reference point where you want the image. I want to set the reference point so it's reflecting that, mirroring it on the vertical axis. So that's what I've done there. Not always massively clear. Now this is one of the most important things, is how to cut the circles. So I got to get a wedge, cut that wedge out. And these are guides. These two lines, I'll get rid of them eventually. So the first thing I'll do is to cut the outer circle. So it's a modification tool, and there's a pair of scissors, and it's a divide tool. I select the outside circle first of all, click, and it says intersection, so that's where I know that's where it's intersecting. And because, has that worked? Oops, let's try that again. So select at the intersection, and okay, let's try that again. This is always like working live. Okay, so divide tool, let's go back and try that again. So the divide tool, which is here, select the outside circle, click on the intersection there, and then go around to the other one, which is the intersection on the other end. And if I hit escape and I go back, and I have a segment there, and I can delete it there. I'll do the same for the inner circle. So modification tools, so cut scissor tool, click on the first intersection, go around, and then click on the other intersection. There we go. Hit escape. Oops. Oh, I did that wrong. Let's just undo. So again, modification tools, scissor tool, click on the first circle, intersection, and then on the other side, intersection. So that should be it. There we go. Gunk. There we go. So I've cut those two circles and cut wedges off them. So this is a technique. So it's using a guide and then using the scissor tool. It's to cut things to shape. use it for absolutely everything. I mean, it really is kind of like the most useful, one of the most useful techniques, because what you're doing, you're creating basic shapes like 2 circles here, and then you're modifying them, and then you're creating other shapes from that. And this is a kind of fundamental, foundational technique. And then another very handy hint, you're getting lots of special handy hints today, rather than just deleting that and then creating lines between the end of here, which is what you can do. The great thing about using these, because I want to create the end for the end of the gabion walls, so rather than deleting it and then drawing another line, you can just use the existing guideline and actually make that form part of the, you can make the existing guideline form part of that shape there. So now you've got your 2 circles and it's just got a line, and because it will snap to the end of the line, I don't have to do any measuring or figure it out. It just says intersection. Oops, I've moved the whole lot. Hold on, just move the end of the line, intersection, dump. Yeah, this is the beauty of CAD. So CAD is all about the line. It's always about individual lines that you're kind of putting precisely together on where they cross over. That's the kind of easiest and most used technique for getting these lines to line up. And then you're creating shapes using different tools. So that's brilliant. Love that. Now, another concept, and this is, don't worry about, this is all just stuff that I'm doing anyway. But so I will be covering this in more detail in the course. But another concept is polylines. Now, most lines, when you're creating them in CAD, they're individual lines. It's this idea that a polyline is like a group. It's like a group of individual lines. But if you've got a shape, then you can tell like the area of a shape, and this is where it is so useful to get firstly to move the group of items around, but also to find out statistics about information about that shape. So you can imagine if you have an area in a garden, you can quickly work out what an area is in the garden, and you can work out how many plants there are, how many plants are required per square meter, and what your square meterage is. So it's super useful. So creating a polyline, you see here in the properties, these are individual lines. But if I double click, it will select all of them together. So that tells me that they're all joined up. It can be a bit tricky doing this, but you know how. So draw polyline, create polyline from selection, and now look at this. I collect that, it's acting as one item, as one enclosed shape, and this is the super cool bit. And I can see from that shape, its total area is 4 square meters. So what this is, again, this is useful for planting ground cover, or for planting, for working out your planting density, but it's also super useful if you're doing any kind of hard landscaping. You can work out how much material. So I know there's 4 square meters, and I can work out the volume. It's going to be roughly 40 centimeters high, I think. So you can work out from that, you can work out how much rubble you need to fill that gabion wall. Yeah, so that's worth its weight in gold, that is. The next thing I'm going to do is to rotate this, because I want that shifted around so it's facing the same way as the seat. And I know that seat is at 70 degrees. So I'll shift it round 90 to 70. I'll just shift it anti-clockwise 70 degrees, and then that will line up. So let's just do that very quickly. So modify, rotate, and then you set the center. It's going to be rotating around the center, and I want it to rotate that way, so that's 70 degrees. Okay, there we go. So that's it, that's my horseshoe shape. And I can always come back to this if I want to widen it or close it. I can always modify this later on. But as I said before, make sure you go out, before you build anything, make sure you go out and you mark it out in real life. Make sure you got the space, make sure the soil's all okay, and try it out and see how it feels when you're actually in that structure that you're going to be creating. Okay, so that is that. Let's exit the block, and here we go. So I've got my wall, and then we've got my labyrinth. I'll do the labyrinth another time. That's plenty for now. Okay, so I hope that's useful. As I said before, I am doing a CAD for gardeners course. It's going to be in at least 2 different parts. I'm going to do an introduction, which is where where it's most useful to learn CAD. So basically for tree spacing and calculating areas. That's actually more useful for kind of larger areas. With smaller gardens like this, what you find is you actually have to get quite accurate with your measuring and your surveying, and it can be, you go, well, I tell you what, sometimes it's, unless you want to learn CAD for a living, it can actually just be easy to use a bit of paper and sketch it out on some grid paper and get dimensions and everything, but just kind of sketch it out on that rather than go for the full CAD experience. Really depends on what you're trying to do. This is like an awful lot in life. What you do really depends on what you're trying to achieve. Okay, so this is CAD. That was creating a block, making a segment, and creating a polyline and rotating it. So quite a lot in there. Hope that's useful or something.